Okay, so now we give the floor to DG Grow, and we have our colleague in Brussels, Joachim Hirscher, and he will speak about open data in public procurement. Joachim, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, and sorry to not be able to be here in person, but I thought this was a really interesting topic, so I wanted to introduce it at least like a video message. So my name is Joachim Hirscher. I work in the European Commission, and I work on public procurement and specifically public procurement data. And so public procurement, that's the purchases by any public bodies all around the EU. It's the purchases of highways and trainways by ministries. It's the purchases by schools, by hospitals, by villages. So it's how how taxpayers' money gets spent. And unsurprisingly, it's a huge pile of money. It's worth 420 billion per year, which is more than the GDP of several EU member states. And the nice thing about public procurement is that it's quite transparent. There's actually a lot of information online available about public procurement in structured data, and I would like to present this information and to you guys, everybody who's watching, to see what you can do with it, whether you get any ideas about how to work with this information. What we are doing in the Commission is that we're trying to find ways how to make public procurement more efficient, how to make it better, how to make sure that how citizens' money gets spent in the most efficient manner possible. And so one of the centerpieces of public procurement in the EU is a website called TED. It's not the TED Talks, it's Tenders Electronic Daily. And this website contains many types of information, but two of them are the main ones. It's information about what public authorities want to buy. So when they say, I want to buy 20 brain scanners, I am a hospital in Bavaria which wants to do that. And it contains information about contract award notices. So what were the results of competition? So when a Bavarian hospital says it wants to buy something, after several months it receives offers from private companies. Finally, it chooses a contractor, and above a certain value, it's obliged to provide transparently this information online, saying, I have bought the brain scanners for this amount of money, and I'm buying it from company XYZ. And so this is what the website looks like, and normally you could use a search interface to find some business opportunities. It's not just the EU, it's also the European Economic Area and Switzerland as well. You see there's really a lot of results. And so you could go inside these notices and you could read through them. And I think it's a nice thing to do to explore. In case any of you guys are supplying things that the government may be interested in, go for it. But what I would like to show today is the open data we have on this subject. If you go down here, there's a link to the EU Open Data Portal. And on the EU Open Data Portal, it's actually one of the most popular data sets, is first of all a list of all the so-called notices, all this information about I want to buy and I have bought that were published on TED, and they are in XML format. So for those of you who are friendly with this programming language or database type, you can work with XML. For those of you who are more economists or data analytics people, there's also a version in a CSV, a comma-separated value format, right here, where for every year in the last decade, there is information about all the contracts which were awarded and all the demand which took place. So now this is not all demand and contract in the EU, of course. It's only those which are regulated by the European Union, which are those roughly above 130,000 euro. Nevertheless, it's still, I think, 500,000 contracts per year. So it's really a fairly nice pile of data. Each of these files has somewhere between 100 and 250 megabytes. So it's a lot of information, but at the same time it's manageable. It should be possible to download and look for some kind of insight, even on your normal computer or notebook. So now, what type of things can be done with this data? I won't go into the structure that much, because that's described here in the documentation, and there's a fairly long code list explaining the data, but you have information about who wants to buy, the way they want to buy, so the type of procedure, the award criteria, whether they care about quality or whether they care about price. The procedure can be more or less open to competition. Then there's information about who was the actual supplier, what value the supplier offered, the number of bids they received, whether it's a framework agreement, so this type of information. If you go into it, you can try to see whether somebody is more efficient in procuring and somebody is less efficient in procuring. To give an example, one of the best websites in the EU is called Z-Index CZ. It's kind of a academic/NGO project in the Czech Republic. And so what these people have done is that they have looked at best practice according to the OECD, the European Commission, best practice in public procurement. And they've said, okay, how can we translate this best practice into actual data? Can we look at the data and see who's procuring in a better way and who's procuring in a, well, less good way, let's put it that way. And what they do is they publish every few years ranking of similar buyers. So they compare large cities, they compare hospitals, they compare the general government ministries, and then you can click and you will get some kind of rating about who's the best, essentially, and best in the sense that they have, for example, attracted the highest number of bids, right? Because the point of competition is that you have 15 companies which compete to supply the government with something, and then the government buys the best thing for the lowest price. So more competition in this sense is good. It's the buyers who use the most transparent procedures, for example. It's the buyers who use progressive or kind of useful techniques such as electronic auctions for the price part, not for the quality part, and so forth. And so you can click on one of these results, and what you will get is a profile of the buyer, which visualizes all of these different indicators based on the data about the procurement. And so this can be done actually on the basis of TED data. It can be done for different countries. It can be done for different regions. It can be done for different sectors of the economy. There's essentially no limit as long as you're happy and willing to play around with the data. So that's one category of things that the CSV or that the TED open data can be used for. Second category is business intelligence. That's not something which we do because that's not really our business, but we often have different consultancies and banks accessing the open data for this purpose. What we ourselves do is that we do various studies on the procurement to see, for example, what is the access of small and medium enterprises to procurement, what is the cross-border dimension of procurement, so how much is it important whether you are a German company bidding in France, and whether it's the distance in kilometers which matters, or whether it's the fact that there's a border and there's some kind of regulatory barrier there, or that there's a linguistic barrier. So this type of stuff, which could be interesting for those of you who are academics, for example. There's quite a bit of academic potential in this data set. Thinking about academic potential, actually recently there has been a nice paper which came out in the British Journal of Political Science, which is a fairly prestigious worldwide journal. And this article was based exactly on the TED CSV data which I presented a while ago. It talks about uncovering high-level corruption. And so what they do is that they use the TED data to look for things which look suspicious. Then when they talk about red flags, red flag can be that, for example, I run 10 different procurement procedures, and if normally I get 3 or 4 companies interested in each procedure, that's pretty normal. If I have once or twice just one company interested, I guess that happens. But if you have 10 procedures coming from one town in a country somewhere, and in 8 cases there was only a single company interested in getting the contract, then it's something suspicious. Yeah, they have spent their time doing procurement, but there was no competition actually. So it was really a waste of time, and maybe they need some help. Maybe there's a need for better training of the people. Maybe they need more people to deal with the many procurement procedures they're running. Maybe they need a better guidance document. Or maybe there was something suspicious. Maybe they actually tried to exclude all the bidders and have only one. And so here he explains a nice methodology of different red flags, of these different indicators, and the results he gets for different EU countries. So that's a pretty nice article based on TED data. One more thing I thought could be interesting for you to see is a project called DigiWhist. It's called Digital Whistleblower. It received some EU funding, and it's a consortium of several European universities, including Cambridge University. And so what these people are doing is that they're taking our TED CSV data, and they're combining it with data from the individual European countries. So, as I said, some procurement falls under EU regulation, and some falls under national regulation. And they try to put these data sets together, give the same meaning to the same variables, and then see what type of information, insights, red flags they can see from the data set as a whole. And so actually there's everything will be open about it. The code will be open source, the data will be freely available. I think they're planning to publish this month, so it should come, keep in touch with them or follow them. I think there's actually a Twitter account, so just follow their Twitter. And fairly soon there should be a huge trove of never before seen data on this site. Okay. That's procurement data. These are the different things you can do with it and the different kind of related projects. I'm wondering whether there's something more I would go into, but I wanted to motivate you. I wanted to tell you there's a big pile of data. There are interesting things you can do with it, and it's all very well documented down here. And we're super happy to respond to any questions you might have at this email address or just at my address, which will be, I think, available on where you found this video cast. So have a look at it. Try to investigate. Try to think whether you see some great hypotheses to test or some great insights to find. And if you do, we'll be really happy about it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Very interesting. And we have a question from Simon here.
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if I'm a participant and I want to use TED data. There's a lot of metadata and it's complicated to start. Do you have some tips for them where to start, which metadata is important? Or
So the easiest thing, go here, click a button on download CSV. And here you have a CSV file, which you can load into, well, you could theoretically use Excel, but it's generally too big for Excel. But if you use R, Python, Stata, SAS, any statistical program, you should be able to easily work with it. And just open this file and start exploring. Very soon you'll see you need to know more about the individual columns in the data. And then you download the TED CSV data information, which is right here. And just read through the document. It's not long. I think there's roughly 5 pages of introduction, and then there's a code list explaining the individual columns.
Yeah, that's important that the people know this information exists. Yeah, that's exactly what we. Yeah. Perfect.
So just a short introduction, and then there's a code book, and so this corresponds exactly with the data you have in the Excel.
I have another question. I was really impressed about this Syndex tool. Do you know or do you have any idea how you could make this tool better for participants? Maybe how to combine it with member states data, for example, or what are open questions which are not answered yet?
Yeah. So there's a fairly extensive documentation here. I think it's in English, at least, a significant part of it. So what they actually do is that they do connect it with other databases in the Czech Republic. So I think they connect it with business registries, they connect it with accounting data, They also connected with data on political finance, so financing of political parties and whether if a company finances a political party, is it more likely to win a procurement contract? And regrettably, the answer is yes, at least for the Czech Republic. So there's a lot to go into here. Now, where I think there's a huge scope for improvement is the coverage. This is just about the Czech Republic, but I think it's a super useful tool for citizens to know how their money is being spent. And if this existed also in other countries, it would be great. What it needs is taking the procurement data, which we discussed, and either doing the analysis on it, or ideally connecting it with the databases which exist in Ireland, Spain, or wherever else, because these are different country by country. So you kind of enrich the data for your national context, and then you make conclusions on the basis of that.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because maybe they can even reuse some modules or some stuff from Zindex and put it for their member states where they are the experts. I think that's a great idea from you. Yeah.
That would be brilliant. There's also a link with DigiWiz as well, so I think DigiWiz is also planning to visualize some part of data. And as I said, everything is open source, or is, and I'm not sure if it's published yet, but I think it's on GitHub actually. So you can definitely contribute or modify their code.
Okay. You were really into deep discussion, so I'm sure people will find it very interesting and will find a lot of inspiration to develop new tools, probably reuse also this one and improve it. So I would like to thank you, Joachim, for your nice and interesting talk, and we hope that your dataset will be used and reused by our Datathon participants. Thank you again,
Thanks
and
for the
bye.
opportunity. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you very much.